Climate is the average of weather, typically precipitation and the temperature in a particular location over a long period, usually for at least 30 years. Climate is a long-term weather condition, unlike the weather which has a short-term weather pattern that can be seasonal. One of the causes of it is the anthropogenic gases. Anthropogenic gases is something that is made by humans, such as the greenhouse gases. An example of this is the carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. This would give certain gases in the atmosphere to absorb energy, slowing or preventing the loss of heat to space. Climate change gives physical Earth different consequences, such as the glaciers and ice sheets melting, increase of heat waves, and heavy precipitation. Melting glaciers add to rising sea levels, which in turn increases coastal erosion and elevates storm surge. As warming air and ocean temperatures create more frequent and intense coastal storms like hurricanes and typhoons. Warmer oceans increase the amount of water that evaporates into the air. When more moisture-laden air moves over the land or converges into a storm system, it can produce more intense precipitation. Human disturbance is a measure of the vulnerability of aquatic resources to a variety of harmful human activities such as tree removal, road building, construction near shorelines, and stream banks. Human health impacts of anthropogenic climatic disruption include changes in exposure to heat stress, air pollution, respiratory allergens, infectious disease, and natural hazard, as well as increased water scarcity, food insecurity, and population displacement.
Is phenology. Phenology refers to the timing of cyclical or seasonal biological events such as migration, egg-laying, flowering, and hibernation. Examples include the date of emergence of leaves and flowers, the first fly of butterflies, the first appearance of migratory birds, the date of leaves coloring and fall into deciduous trees, the dates of egg-laying birds and amphibia, or the timing of developmental cycles of temperate zone honeybee colonies. So let's proceed to satellite phenology. When we say satellite phenology, it is frequently used to illustrate changes in plant phenology and the effect of climate forcing. And some advantage of phenology includes global coverage and integrated signal. So when we say global coverage, it means the maximum geographic coverage of the Earth towards the northernmost and southernmost, parallel visible from satellites deployed in geostationary orbital location. And integrated signals means the summation of signals under particular time domain to get a modified signal. So, there are limitations of satellite phenology. Number one is short period of record. Means the capacity for the phenological satellite was just limited to access the records being observed. Number two is cloud cover interference. Next is habitat shift. When we say habitat shift, it is a change in the local environmental condition in which a particular organism lives. Habitat shift is a change can occur naturally through droughts, disease, fire, hurricanes, mudslides, volcanoes, earthquakes, slight increase of or decreases in seasonal temperature or precipitation. Species shift population. Population are all the members of species that lives in one area. You are a part of human population for your hometown. A freshwater pond has multiple populations, including a population of mallards, ducks, and a population of cattle plants growing on the edge. For example, by 2025, the median age of US population will rise from 34 to 43 years. In Germany, it will increase from 39 to 50 years. 1/4 of the German population will be over 65, and the members of new labor force entrants decline by 1/3.
There are four implications of restoring the ecosystem, but before we jump into it, we need to know first how do we value the ecosystem and enable for us to determine the ways in taking care of it. First is, we need to emphasize our economic interests. This will give us to have importance towards our ecosystems using in order to develop our economy. Like cultivating our ecosystems, for example, planting crops of rice, banana plantation, palm, and planting more trees in different areas would sustain lots of foods to import and produce, which would help countries' economic stability as well as to restore our environment's ecosystem. Second is, we value our ecosystem by making our own steps of willingness to abide for the restoration, and since there will be lots of counterproductive phenomena that we possibly have to face towards our climate and ecosystem stability. Counterproductive means hindrance. An example of it is a natural disaster and the human activities existing today. Next is, in addition, we need also to have a realization towards ourselves. We must need to inculcate within our minds the contribution of it for us to survive. The foods we take like meats, rice, fruits, fish are all produced by our ecosystem. Buildings, medicines, any products and services in our economic are all possible because of the help of the ecosystem's resources. Lastly, we need to value our ecosystem for its existence. Couldn't be replaced and its loss couldn't be predicted in a short matter of time. Animals, plants, and other living organisms and species on Earth don't have voices for us to further hear their complaints. It is said that it needs something like them to lose before started noticing it. That is why we need to value our ecosystem before it's too late. So, here are the strategies for the ecosystem's management. Number one is the command and control management, a style of leadership that uses standards, procedures, and output statistics to regulate the organization. An example of this is the barangay captain, who orders the rules and regulations for his members to follow, like proper waste disposal and waste segregation. Natural resources management refers to the utilization of natural resources such as land, water, air, minerals, forests, fisheries, wild flora, and fauna. An example of this is the irrigation of water in barangay. Helps to avoid flooding to secure people's safety. Next is the adaptive management. It is a procedure for implementing management while learning about which management actions are most effective at achieving specified objects. Like when typhoons occur, it helps them to undergo which prior actions is taken for that certain situations to execute. Strategic management. It involves formulation and implementation of the major goals and initiative taken by an organization's manager's behalf. This area let them structure some plans for their decisions making which suits their main purpose for the action.
So, for the continuation of the report, let's tackle about historical reference conditions. Historical means past or history. Reference means context, while conditions means circumstances. Historical reference condition is a human-related investigative actions pertaining to what characteristics of searching for or researching conditions or circumstances into past or current data or knowledge of a subject. So why do you think we need to reference our materials in history, especially in relation to dealing with the circumstances like climate change? Well, it is because thorough referencing of good sources lends weight and authority to your own argument and conclusions. So we need historical reference conditions in order to know and compare on how the system of our climate today will change in the future. The data from past events up to now will serve as a basis as to how they will respond to the future circumstances. However, in contrast to that, relying solely on historical reference conditions is problematic. Why? It is because sources may not be reliable and not also or may not also represent misleading facts about the events. Not all past events can be studied because of the lack of evidence or source of materials. So we should keep in mind that secondary sources of information can be more biased because they usually contain the data that the authors wrote using multiple sources. It is worth mentioning that the primary sources can also be biased, and because the research is looking for the answers in the past, so there is no guarantee of information accuracy. Climate change may not support historic conditions. It is because climate is always changing from time to time. It is unpredictable, but as what I have said earlier, it can be used as a basis to gather information about the occurring circumstances. Historical reference conditions may lead to failure of restoration efforts. Of course, there are important and real challenges that interfere with accomplishing the desired outcomes of restorations by solely relying on historical reference conditions. It is because natural systems are constantly changing and humans have imperfect understanding about natural systems. Next are the response strategies. So when we say adaptive or adaptation strategies, this helps the ecosystem to accommodate change. It is a program, project, or approach that has been developed to respond to anticipated climate change impacts in a specific area of potential concern. It also looks to transform components of life so that the impacts of climate change can be reduced or prevented.
Climate change can make it more difficult for communities to provide drinking water and wastewater services, but protect water quality and maintain healthy aquatic environments. The adaptation strategies offer possible ways to address anticipated climate risk to water management, like for example, water utility, water quality, and ecosystem protection. These sample of adaptive strategies help to distribute the water to the households of the people living in a certain area evenly, and their job is to improve water quality and address the problem of the climate change to water management.
Second is the mitigation strategies or efforts. These are to lower or remove greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere that are warming our planet. While integrated strategies are the integration of climate change adaptation and mitigation into a long-term planning, since it is key to securing social and economic development. Okay, so these are the mitigation strategies. First one is retrofitting. Retrofitting is the process of modifying something after it has been manufactured. It involves changing a building systems or structure after its initial construction and improves amenities for occupants. For example, nationwide, buildings account for a staggering 49% of energy consumption. Individually, most homeowners pay more than necessary to cover utility bills because of air leaks and poor insulation. So by retrofitting your home, not only will you be reduced your own energy bills, but also you will contribute to the reduction of national energy consumption, thereby helping to mitigate the climate change.
We have integrated strategies. This policy brief aims to increase the conceptual understanding, awareness, and knowledge of joint adaptation and mitigation actions and provide the rationale for foresting integrated actions that could create a long-term impact.
So we see this throughout the world that as the number of floods and droughts increase in frequency and intensity, threatening livelihoods, human health, economies, and infrastructure. In order to adequately address these emerging climate risks, new ways of planning for the future are required. For example, coastal planning needs to anticipate the effects of sea level rise. Job creation efforts in rural settings must take into account the impact of climate change on different parts of the value chain and on the resources that feed into the value chain. For example, Cambodia and Niger. So these are the two countries expected to be impacted severely by climate change, where early steps have been taken to adapt. In Cambodia, agricultural planning is addressing inconsistent water access through promoting private sector investment and the diffusion of green technologies such as solar water pumps and water efficient irrigation. In Niger also, new varieties of drought resilient seeds have been disseminated along with training and investment to promote the diversification of livelihoods. Moving forward, in addition to these important steps, countries need to transition from energy intensive economic growth to low carbon growth with climate resilience. If we do not address adaptation in development planning decisions in the context of low carbon growth, the impact of investments will be lost. It is clear that for many developing countries around the world, adaptation to climate change cannot happen effectively in isolation. It cannot and should not be separated from development. So, choosing the appropriate policy instruments to bring about this convergence is essential.
In conclusion, prevention in nature always cheaper and easier than cure. Warming of climate system is unequivocal. Human-caused warming over last 30 years has likely had a visible influence on many physical and biological systems. Conservation, though, like adaptation, mitigation, restoration, can slow down the effect of global warming.